Since 2017, Liga side Girona has been 47% owned by Citigroup. After an impressive season where they briefly competed with Real Madrid for the Spanish title, Girona FC is guaranteed a top four finish and a spot in next season's Champions League. On Tuesday, UEFA's club financial control body CFCB informed football stakeholders about updates to multi-club ownership rules for entry into continental competitions. These changes aim to prevent conflicts of interest due to the rise of multi-club consortiums like Citigroup, which owns or holds stakes in 13 clubs worldwide. Last year, this rules led to investigations into the ownership structures of AC Milan, Aston Villa, and Victoria, as well as Brighton and Union Saint-Gilloise. Now, UEFA closed these cases after the clubs made significant changes to limit investor influence. Joining me for more on this is Enitan Obadina, editor, SportsIntel. Thank you, Enitan, for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be on Business Edge.
All right, thank you. Well, UEFA's club financial control body, that's the CFCB, sent a letter to football stakeholders, sort of informing them of updates to multi-club rules about entry into continental-wide competitions. I'd like you to begin by sort of setting the foundation. What existed before that letter was sent, and what sort of necessitated the change?
Basically, what the UEFA did, and they've always done when it comes to the integrity of the game for them, is trying to ensure that no one single owner has control over more than one club in their competition. That's talking about the UEFA Champions League or the Europa League or even the Europa Conference League. Basically, the idea is to ensure there are integrity in the game and there are no calls for two teams owned by one single owner having that lock or sort of that situation where they will have to play against each other. And of course, opposing teams will have doubts about the trust level of the outcome of that game, especially when it affects other clubs. And they've always done this. Basically, Manchester City is being caught. They are not the first that got such notice. Some years back, it was RB Leipzig and Salzburg. Red Bull created the club called RB Leipzig, playing in the German division. They grew up so fast, winning promotion. And of course, later on, they bought RB Salzburg in the Austrian League. And at some point, both teams qualified for the UEFA Champions League. And what UEFA standardly what they do basically is to ensure that the club with the highest placement in each of the league will get the go ahead to play if they are owned by the same owner. But of course, in some cases where Article 5 of the integrity law that UEFA banks their actions on basically says significant control over more than one club playing in the same competition. And this is where the issue of Man City comes in. Unlike RB Leipzig and RB Salzburg, where it was found out that RB Leipzig is not totally owned. RB Leipzig is owned by Red Bull, but they only provide some form of sponsorship for Salzburg. In the case of Man City, they own a significant amount of control. That's one of the updates of the Article 5 of the club financial regulations of the UEFA. They own more than they own 47%, and what UEFA says you must own less than 30% of that club, and basically they don't want a situation where the City Group, the owner, have significant control to make decisions that affect the two clubs in the championship. So they've issued them some form of letter and obviously say, hey, you've got to reduce your ownership and within a short period. But understanding the financial processes involved in divesting significant shares, what the club is to set up, what UEFA has done is to help them set up a trust. They can transfer such shares ownership for a while so that they will have enough time to be able to divest properly and not lose money over time. That is the current situation for Manchester City. That's Manchester City owners, the City Group, their clubs, Manchester City in the English Premier League, and of course Girona in the La Liga.
Well, talking about the trust, is it already set up? And do you think that City Group will take up that particular offer? Well, it's not even an offer. So what do you think Citigroup will do?
It's a big call because now they have to share between 17 to 18% of their ownership shares in Girona. That's what most people are thinking, that Girona would be the club that they would have to let go. Manchester City as the club has got a bigger stake and a bigger chance of possibly winning or going for the Champions League, bringing more money on the table. So Girona will be the club that they will probably divest between 17 to 18% of their shares to put it in the trust. It's a big decision. They have between I think around June 8th to 10th to make that decision. We've not heard so much about the actual plan or the actual process for divestment of these shares, but we expect that City would have been thinking about this long time. They can be very clinical when it comes to their financial situations and their planning. Would have been thinking about the moment Girona were head-to-head with Real Madrid in the La Liga in terms of who was going to win the Spanish La Liga. They, of course, would have toyed with that idea. And in the coming days, we expect a bigger picture of how they plan to divest their shares, if they are going to use the trust or if they have a ready-made standby company that will take it off their hands. Maybe collect it back later, but of course, we expect that big picture in the days to come.
Now, I was going to ask you what you thought about the timing, if you think the time is short. But from what you said, you feel that they must have known about this before now, and somehow they might have been preparing for it. Okay, so apart from City Group, which go ahead.
Okay. Basically, everybody that watches them say, hey, the time is short, truthfully, and UEFA also recognizes that. That's why they made a small allowance for helping them to set up a trust where they can transfer it and it can be safe. So UEFA can be sure that when it comes to that level of influence over decision making, Girona using it as a possible club that they are divesting their shares will not have effect in quote on terms of what can happen basically. So the time is not short. Like I rightly pointed out, they've known this for a while. This is not the first time it's happening. They have clubs scattered around the world, choices in La Liga and other clubs in South America they've brought. So this is just UEFA's way of protecting the image of their game.
Well, apart from City Group, which of course has 47% share in the Liga side Girona, you're talking about them probably having to divest whatever is above 30%. But talk to us about other groups that sort of hold such economic or voting rights over more than 2 clubs. So far, would you say that there have been instances of manipulation in any way?
It comes down to a situation where both teams are to face each other, to influence for instance, paint a picture of having Manchester City and, of course, Girona in the same group. And then on the last match day, you are looking at Girona maybe possibly going out of the competition by any chance. And then, of course, they influence the game against Manchester City or their opponents. We've not recorded any major incident for clubs in terms of ownership. But in terms of fairness and, of course, influence in games, UEFA tried to investigate as much as possible, but there have not been clearly recorded incidences where match manipulation has been sort of reported and, of course, judged on that basis for now. So that's what they try to do in order to protect the image of the game long term by having these rules in place, ready, so that it will not get to a situation where a club has to protest that the match is being manipulated because 2 clubs are being owned by one entity.
Well, you know, I'm just looking at this with my business mind and I'm asking, I mean, I can't imagine investing in a particular asset and just when that asset is, you know, ripe to even yield more gains for me and then I'm forced to sort of divest because of some form of regulation. I mean, let's look at it that way. What do you think?
It's a fine line, if you ask me. Basically, you understand that this recent surge in football ownership around the world, we're having a lot of the American investors, venture companies coming in. You can see in the case of AC Milan and Toulouse, in the AC Milan in Italy and Toulouse in the French League 1. Basically, they are trying to get a piece of football. We also can see instances where investors are coming in. We witnessed the case between UEFA and, of course, the Super League by majority of the club being backed by major finance and venture capitalist companies trying to get a piece of what football has to offer. So the investors know the game they are playing. They are trying to own multiple pieces so that, like in the case of Watford, Udinese, and I think Granada, 3 clubs in 3 different leagues being owned by a single owner, a single entity. And that tells you that sometimes they move players within themselves in order to help each of the clubs, especially the clubs that are not doing well. I could cite the case of Isaac's Success, the Nigerian striker currently with Udinese. He started with Granada, basically, and from Granada he moved to Watford for a then club record fee, and from Watford he moved to Udinese. These 3 clubs are owned by a single family, basically. And of course, we've seen City, the current club in the eye of the storm in terms of this financial fair play rule, signing Nigeria's Kayode Olanrewaju, and of course, immediately shipping him over to Girona. These are the issues that these are some of the things that the owners try to do, try to get some level, use their level of influence to get players move within clubs. But for them, of course, they worry when it only comes to continental events. For local clubs, I do not think any single league we allow a single entity to own more than a club in their league. Based on their rules all over most leagues that you have in Europe and the rest of the world. So they have less concern when it comes to the individual leagues. They try to put their investment through, try to make it work and earn enough profit as much as possible. They only have issues, which I think most of them are well aware of well in advance, is when these clubs do so well and then they move to the level of playing on the European continent. That's where that fine line must not be crossed, and they will have to find a way to quickly divest within that period if their major interest is to get their club to play in these major European competitions. Of course, more money comes when you have to calculate television money, broadcast right money. You have to calculate sponsorship money, participation fee that comes from UEFA. A lot of windfall that they expect that sort of help their bottom line on the long run, apart from the money they are putting in for sponsorship. So it's a fine line that they have to decide within themselves when they get to that point. How important is having my club, my two clubs playing in the European continent, especially Champions League, where that's the big money competition around the world, and of course trying to protect their investment over long. It's a case of 30% or lower on the long run.
Okay, thank you so much, Enitan Obadina, editor SportsIntel. I mean, there's a whole lot to talk about, but thank you for the thoughts you've shared so far.